I grew up on a triangular block at 218 Hart Street, Watertown, Wisconsin. And that was over 25 years ago. I was almost 5 years old. My brother, Nate, was 2.5 years old. And we had moved to that neighborhood because if we walked to the end of Hart Street, all the way to 3rd Street, that was where we could watch Dad. As he crossed the street, he'd turn around, wave to us, and then we could wave back and say, "Bye, Dad, bye." Because his work was only 1 block away at Hydrite Chemical Company. We could watch the whole time until he entered those doors. So we had Hart Street, 3rd Street for my dad, and Dakota Street on the other side. Well, after waving Dad, it was time for Mom and my brother and I to go back to the house. We had just moved to the neighborhood, and there were all these things to unpack, but my mom decided it was time to do laundry, and it was time to hang up that laundry so we could have it dried. And in our backyard, we had clotheslines. We had a pole over here, we had a pole over there, and then the long rope that stretched across it was perfect so that Mom could hang up the clothes. And since I was almost 5, my status, I was able to be the expert clothespin picker-upper. And Mom would take those clothespins from me. Now she would sometimes put those clothespins in her mouth, and I could watch as that fiber was in her mouth, and to me it was if I was tasting wood, just watching her. Then I'd look to where my brother was playing with his ball, about the size of his tummy. He'd take that ball and he'd rub it in the grass and then go blah, 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 and then rub it in the grass and blah, 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 until by watching him, I had plastic and grass in my mouth. And if I didn't want to taste wood, and if I didn't want to taste plastic or grass, I could look out beyond our backyard, because we had moved to a land of no fences. There was only one person on that block who had a fence, and that was because they had a Cocker Spaniel. But everyone else, everyone's land was everyone's land. And in the very middle of it, it was like a park. We could run out there. And that was where I would look as the clothes would dry in the breeze. And the 3 of us soaked in our new surroundings. Now, there are other cultures that move from place to place, and in northern Australia, an Aboriginal tribe, they had finally made it to this land. The sun was beating down on that earth, on that coral-colored clay, and the sandstone outcroppings. And there were a few trees that looked more like sticks with shrubs on top of them. And then the children played about with their bare feet. They could feel the prickles of the underbrush. And then the boys jumped on those thorns to see how long they could stand it as a game. And the girls, not to be outdone, kicked up dust into the air until the mothers who were unpacking the things into this new place looked up from what they were doing and called out, "Warugas! Children, you have created a cloud on earth and now we cannot see you." But then the mothers continued with their unpacking. With all the travels, the families all needed to eat, for even their bones were showing through their skin. And the fathers took out their boomerangs and spears so they could go out and look for kangaroo and emu and bring that meat home. Meanwhile, in one of the bushes, Gooloo, the Magpie woman, watched. She was a rotund woman with black and white wrappings, and she had a necklace made of animal bones and feathers, and she stroked it as she watched the children. She cringed every time she heard them laugh. And then she knew what she would do, for these people had moved into her land. She emerged from the brush and she walked to the closest person, who was a young mother watching her 3-year-old at play. Welcome, welcome to this land. I know that you are hungry for traveling so far. And if you were to gather all of the other mothers, I will tell you of where you can find more food. The young mother jumped up and ran to gather all of the mothers until there was a council of mothers. Welcome. As I told this young woman, there is much food to be had here. And I know your husbands have gone out to go hunting and they will bring meat. But your children are hungry now. And I could show you a place where you will find bees. You'll hear that wonderful hums, and you'll know that soon in your warugas, in your children's mouths, they will have that honey ooze down their throats. And then there, nearby, you will also find ruies, such fruit that though tart at first, oh, it would be such sour for your children to dance upon their tongues. And then you must have the dunber seeds, and you can borrow my flat stone so you may crush it into powder, and that way you may bake with it. Feed your children now. All the mothers talked until the eldest mother stood up. We shall go to this place and gather the food, but we will take our children with us. I understand, but I would be willing to watch them, and I would feed them too. I even have some dunber seeds already grounded into powder. And you know that you will not gather as much if you take them with you. The mothers talked again, but this time there were whispers. And the eldest mother stood again. We will go, but you will watch our children? You will have both eyes watching them? Yes, of course, I will watch them with 2 eyes. The mothers gathered their digging sticks and their sacks, and they headed in the direction where Gooloo pointed to them. And with the mothers gone, all of the children swarmed around Gooloo. And then one of the children stepped forward. Are you really Wagtail Woman? I've heard my mother tell stories about the creation time, about a woman that I think looks like you, even kind of walk like her. And I know that she sings songs. Do you sing songs? Oh, no, child. I am not really Wagtail Woman. I am Gooloo, the Magpie Woman. And I do not sing. But if it is sound that you are after, I will show you a place with such sounds that you will hear. Would you like to go? And all the children jumped up and down on their feet, and that was Gooloo's answer. So Gooloo led the children out and around the sandstone outcroppings until there was a cave. And from that cave wafted such smell, such stench, that none of the children ventured to go inside. Until finally, one of the children stepped into that musky cave and called out a sound, and when that child heard that sound repeated back to him, he giggled with delight, went deeper into the cave, and then started to shriek and to howl any sound that could come to his mind. Soon all the other children ran into the cave, and they made noises, all kinds of noises, until there was a rumbling at the mouth of the cave, and then silence, and then shrieking and cackling. That was when the mothers returned. They had indeed gathered much food, and they called out to their children, "Warugas, children! Warugas, children, come from your hiding." But not one footstep did they hear. They continued to call out, "Warugas, children, Warugas, children, until the mothers knew what had happened. It wasn't long before the fathers came back bringing much meat, and the mothers had to explain how Gooloo had watched their children, and now their children were no more. You know that we always bring back meat after the hunt, and now we will go in search of our children. But if we do not find them, then heavy shall be our hands. And the fathers went out and searched, and they called out, Warugas, children! Warugas, children! But they did not hear a footstep. Every time the wind blew through that land, it sounded like a wailing, and the mothers knew it was the wailing of their children, children that they would never see again. Now for my mother, she looked where my 2.5-year-old brother, Nate, was supposed to be sitting. That imprint in the grass was there, but not my little brother. And her eyes grew wide. Then she ran into the house. I heard the screen door slam behind her. And through the screen door, I could watch as she picked up the telephone and punched in those numbers and called my dad. And then I looked down the street at Hart Street and 3rd Street. I saw my dad running as fast as he could. He rushed to my mother. We have just moved to this place. We don't even know the neighbors. Then my dad went to the garage and shook out his old rusty green bike from all the boxes around it. And he rode one way around that triangular block, and my mother went the other way. But before she turned the corner, she looked back at me. Rachel, stay where you are. You're almost 5. Stay where you are. Of course, Mom. So then Mom continued on her search. And I did stay there for a while. But then I remembered we had moved to a land of no fences, and I ran into the middle of that block. And when I was in the middle of that block, I could look out and I could see in between the houses, zoop, 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 my father riding his bike. And if I looked the other way, between those houses, I could see da-da-da, 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 my mother just booking it. I had never seen her go that fast before. Well, then something caught my eye, for my father had stopped riding his bike. And I followed his gaze, and there was my little brother. He was still holding that plastic ball. But as soon as he saw my dad, he dropped the ball. And the biggest, goofiest smile spread on his face. And his chubby little legs just took off running. My dad caught my brother and lifted up in the sky. And then my dad walked his bike home so he could put a hand on my brother's shoulder. The family was together again, and we were able to watch Dad as he went to the corner of Hart Street and 3rd Street and say, "Bye, Dad, bye." And then Mom, Nate, and I went back so we could hang up the rest of those wet clothes. And I could hear my mom go, "Whew, this will be a good neighborhood after all."